You may know my next guest as the right-hand man to the boss, on and off for more than a few decades.
On the guitar, Miami Stevie Van Zandt.
Or maybe when he played the right-hand man to another boss on a little HBO show. Yeah, that one. Over his decades-long career, Stevie Van Zandt has also used his platform to protest the South African apartheid in 1985 with a song he wrote, produced, and gathered dozens of music legends to sing. It's called Sun City. He created the Teach Rock Foundation in an effort to make the arts a core part of public education. And these days, you can see him as ex-gangster Frank Tagliano in Netflix's Lilyhammer, or hear him on one of his SiriusXM channels, including the latest Little Steven's coolest songs in the world, or read about what it's like to be one of the coolest guys in the world, at least in my opinion, in his memoir, Unrequited Infatuations. Stevie Van Zandt recently joined me. Stevie Van Zandt, it's great to meet you. Thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure, Jim.
So everybody knows you're a Jersey kid. I don't think most people know you're a Jersey kid by way of Watertown. Do you want to share all your favorite memories of Watertown, Stevie?
Well, unfortunately, it's a short list because I was gone by 7 or so. I talk about it in the book a little bit. All I remember is my grandfather taking me down to the Italian section of town, where they still had push carts, you know, like in Godfather 2. And you know, I just remember lots of snow.
Well, you missed out on the Watertown Diner, but maybe next time you're here. So should I be embarrassed that until I read your book this weekend, it never occurred to me that your relationship to Springsteen and to Tony Soprano is incredibly similar? Should I be embarrassed? I am right?
Well, it just kind of evolved that way. I mean, we didn't think of it either, so no reason to be embarrassed. I didn't think of it, and David Chase didn't really think of it. As I talk about, he cast me originally as Tony Soprano, and when HBO said, "Are you out of your mind?" You know, this guy has never acted before, and this is a really big deal to us. So anyway, we ended up, you know, coming up with with running the strip club for the family, and ended up being very similar to that, you know, kind of, you know, best friend, consigliere type of, you know, advisor role, which I was playing to some extent with Bruce Springsteen my whole life. Yeah.
You know, when I was looking at your resume, it's really unbelievable. You know, Sopranos, E Street, Lilyhammer, Disciples of Soul, anti-apartheid work, music education in schools, SiriusXM. So I didn't know what to focus on. So I reached out to consult with a local guy who says he met you at what he called a small mob club in Jersey called the Sunshine Inn. Do you know who that might have been? Peter Wolf.
I don't know.
Peter Wolf. He said you and Springsteen show up at this mob club, as he calls it. So here's what Peter Wolf said I should ask you about, so I'll follow Peter's instruction. He said, first of all, he said, you've done as much to promote new artists, particularly with the SiriusXM stuff, as anybody he knows. Why does that matter so much to you, and how successful do you think you've been?
Well, the job for the last 20 years has been trying to keep this endangered species called rock and roll just alive in any way possible. Rock and soul, really. So I literally dedicated the last, you know, couple of decades between the radio station. I now have 3 on Sirius Satellite, and the record company, and the publishing companies, and even the school founded, the curriculum, you know, is based on keeping the Renaissance, what I call the Renaissance period, accessible for future generations. The Renaissance period being, you know, roughly 50s, 60s, and 70s. You know, everybody can measure it their own way, but those 3 decades will inform the public, continues to inform our entertainment world, and I think we'll continue to do so until they invent new instruments. So I realized that we're no longer mainstream as far as rock and roll goes. We have been returned to the cult where we started, in 1954, 55. And maybe that's where we belong. I think the fact that we were mainstream for those decades, I think may have been an anomaly, of history, But the truth is we're back in a pop era now. I clocked the rock era from Like a Rolling Stone, 65, to Kurt Cobain's death in 94. That 30-year period, it was really a rock era coming out of this Renaissance period where the greatest art being made was also the most commercial. Yeah. And I just think my whole mission is to try and keep that accessible for future generations. And so we, on the radio show, we have introduced over 1,000 new bands, 1,000. Now, do they break through? Unlikely. But the fact that they don't have a reward at the end of this rainbow, it makes you want to support them even more, And so we're hoping that, to try and recreate an infrastructure that can support a rock and roll world, even on a lower, subsistence level, as long as it continues to exist.
One other mission of yours, Stevie, that Peter Wolf mentioned to me was something you talk a lot about in the book, this anti-apartheid work and pulling together, 50 superstars from Dylan to Bonnie Raitt to Miles Davis. And it seems to me, having read your book, if you put together a resume and put the thing that mattered most to you at the top, I sort of get the sense that Sun City would be right up there. Is that fair?
Yes, that'll be the most important thing I would do politically, for sure. But I think a couple of things hopefully will outlive me. I think my radio formats, I believe, will outlive me. I think they're extremely important, and I think the curriculum will outlive me also. So I think in some ways those things are more important, really, in the bigger sense.
When you say outlive you, wait, when you say outlive you, you're not going anywhere, are you? That we don't know about, or no?
No.
Okay,
no.
I want to be clear.
No, I might go around the corner to the deli, but that's about it. No.
Can you talk about that teach thing for a second? I've read you say you want to add an A, convert STEM to STEAM, the A being arts. This rock and roll curriculum is being taught by thousands, if not tens of thousands of teachers in schools around the country, isn't it?
Yeah, we're in the tens of thousands at this point, somewhere around 40,000. And I didn't get a recent count of the lesson plans, but it's got to be around 300 by now, online for free, teachrock.org. And we wanted to do something that was easy, accessible for teachers, and free, and we wanted to be the hip class. We wanted to be the class that the kids look forward to. The statistics show that if a kid likes one single class or one single teacher, they'll come to school. Yeah. And we really, really want to, eventually, we want to affect the dropout rate, which is just an absolute embarrassment. It's close to 50% in the poor neighborhoods, and that's just not acceptable. And 50% of those kids end up in the criminal justice system sooner or later. So that's just not tolerable. So we want to affect that, and we want to, as you said, keep the arts in the DNA of the public education system.
That's great.
STEM, which you mentioned, science, technology, engineering, and math, has been the focus, and we feel extremely strongly that an A for the arts belongs in that equation, not as some kind of extra after-school thing either. As a literally not only a part of the school main school day, but actually integrated into the other disciplines. We want to put the arts into science, into math, into engineering. Not as a separate thing, and that is where things start to become transformed and a little bit more easier to digest for young kids.
Couldn't agree more. The pride of Middletown High School, Stevie Van Zandt. So, how are you a good student or no?
The worst.
The worst.
I actually got kicked. I got kicked out of high school actually, and And I felt bad for my mother, so I went back and then eventually graduated. But yeah, I was just the worst.
That
I
Van
just couldn't
Zandt
wait.
kid will never make anything of himself either. I think they said that in those days, didn't they?
I'm
So,
sure that. Yeah.
one more Peter Wolf reference. You mentioned Peter's in your book a lot now. He's a good buddy of yours. You write
Yes.
that he sort of tipped the scales on you deciding to do this acting thing you haven't done. The great line from him is you guys are out at dinner, and he says, don't overthink it. If it bombs, it bombs. Nobody will care. Was that like a pivotal moment in your decision-making?
Yeah, because I had a lot of friends. I got I don't know, half a dozen consiglieres that I listened to, and a lot of them were adamantly opposed to it. Some of my best friends were like, you can't do that. That's you're a rock and roll guy. You have all this rock and roll credibility. It's gonna go right out the window if you start, you act in some stupid TV show, But Peter was like, don't worry about it. And he started listing all of these people that had TV shows. Did you know Steve McQueen had a show? Did you know this one had a show? That one had a show. So eventually I said, well, all right, and he did tip the scales.
Speaking of tipping the scale, the Rolling Stones, who I know were an inspiration to you, I think are going to be performing into their 80s. You and Springsteen, young 70s. Can you see doing what you do and Springsteen doing what he does as 80-year-olds on a stage?
Yeah, you can imagine it. I mean, it's a little bit weird, okay, and I freely acknowledge it. Our generation seems to be changing the very concept of chronological time.
Thank goodness.
I mean, really. We changed the idea of a job being a drag. Our generation was sort of like, you mean we can have a job and enjoy it too? And that alone was kind of a new idea. The concept of liking your job so much that you didn't really, I don't take vacations. I took a vacation in 1978, and I didn't like it. But there's just you don't think about that, as past generations have, where you're working to live. We kind of live to work. I don't know. The identity of you are what you do, at least in our world. You know what I mean?
Well, especially if you make yourself happy and make other people happy doing what you love doing too. It's a big deal. Yeah. I'm going to read a quote from your book. You wrote, contrary to popular scientific rumor, the Big Bang that gave birth to the universe did not happen 10 million years ago. It happened on February 9th, 1964. What happened on February 9th, 1964? I guess you were a 14-year-old little kid. What happened?
Yeah, I was 13 actually, and there was a Sunday night variety show hosted by the most unlikely of characters named Ed Sullivan, who, like I said, you could picture Richard III like on LSD. The entire family would gather around the one TV in the house. And he'd have something for every generation. He got puppets for the little kids and opera for the older people and something for the teenagers. And something for the teenagers, February 9, 1964, was a group called the Beatles, who he had kind of discovered at an airport, supposedly. At that point, I was introduced to the concept of a band, and I'd never really seen a band before. The idea of 4 or 5 guys, singing and playing, and that was a new idea. And suddenly America and probably the rest of the Western world became a band culture overnight. Yeah. After that, not only did everybody have a band in their garage the next day, but when you went out at night, whether you were with a musician or not, you either went to the movies, you went to the drive-in, or you went to see a band. I mean, that's just what everybody started doing all of a sudden. And that wasn't the case really before that. If you went to your high school dance, it would be an instrumental group, So it was really a change in the culture in many ways, but certainly completely changed my world. And then To complete the picture, the Rolling Stones came 4 months later, and they just made it look a little bit more accessible, made it look a little easier than it was. You know?
So before you go, complete the loop. That band on February 9th, 1964, one of the members was Paul McCartney. What was it like for that 13-year-old little boy, decades later, to have Paul McCartney play with him?
Yeah, it was miraculous. You know, we had a couple of he'd come on stage with the E Street Band at Hyde Park, which was thrilling. And then he invited me and Bruce on stage with him at Madison Square Garden, which was thrilling. But to come on my stage with the Disciples of Soul, my band, and have the faith to walk on with no rehearsal, no idea what we were going to do, that said a lot to me. And it was just an incredible endorsement. And really, justified my entire existence as far as I was concerned. It was certainly, easily one of the high points of my life.
Well, I keep hoping you have many more high points. Stevie Van Zandt, it's great to meet you. Thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.
You too, my friend. Say hi to Peter for me.
The book again is Unrequited Infatuations. My thanks to Peter Wolf for the interview guidance and to Larry Multer for making the Van Zandt connection for us.